Hello, and welcome to Trade Talks, our quarterly discussion on all things and issues surrounding international trade. I'm Tom O'Brien with the Center for International Trade and Transportation at California State University, Long Beach. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Patricia Elliott, the Consul and Senior Trade Commissioner, and Gavin Nardocchio-Jones, the Consul for Political and Public Affairs at the Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Today we're going to explore the relationship between the U.S. and Canada, both from a trade perspective, but also from a broader perspective as well, because this is an important relationship. But I thought I'd start with a little bit of discussion about the diplomatic corps, since you both represent that. Talk a little bit, if you could, about what you do, the role that you play, and as a preamble to what we want to discuss today. Patricia?
Happy to. So I'm the manager here at the Canadian Consulate in Los Angeles, and I have a team of trade commissioners that work with Canadian companies that are looking to do business in our territory, Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada. And we also work with American companies that are looking for foreign investment up into Canada. So we connect companies on both sides of the borders with business opportunities. I've been in LA now for about 2 years. It'll be 2 years next week. And I came in from Calgary before that, where I was responsible for 3 provinces and a territory up north, and working with Canadian companies at that point, getting them ready to come down to markets such as California.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Your time in Los Angeles. It's a good place to land, I imagine.
It is a wonderful place to be for 4 years.
That's great. Gavin, what about the role that you play at the Consul?
Thanks, Tom. Well, I'm the manager for the FPDS, or Foreign Policy and Diplomacy Service of the Consulate. Our role is mainly advocacy and network building. Our focus is on areas such as economy and trade policy, environment and energy, security and borders, and values and brand. Values and brand being more cultural relations and public affairs. Small team of 4, including plus myself. I've been here since September. My previous postings include Senegal, Dakar in West Africa, and London in the UK, where I fulfilled similar roles in the political and public affairs sphere. Our relationship at the office is great. We work hand in hand on a number of files, the international business development side and the political and public affairs teams. But we also have representatives, diplomats who help Canadians in the region. So the consular team, if you lose a passport or get arrested or something, they can help you. We also have representatives from the immigration department that do visas and refugee applications and things like that. And then finally, we have representatives from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canada Border Services Agency, so Customs and Federal Police.
So a big operation, right?
It's about 60 people right now, and Los Angeles is the second biggest mission in the U.S. So obviously Washington being the embassy, New York, and following that Los Angeles. So a large group of people.
Patricia, it strikes me that Canada may be the U.S.'s least best-known ally, maybe one that we take for granted, both from a trading perspective, but from other perspectives as well. Could you talk a little bit about the U.S.-Canada relationship from your perspective?
I think sometimes, like you said, we're perhaps the least known because we're so similar. Similar languages, similar values, close borders. But when it comes down to business, every time you go into a market, it is different. When I was working with Canadian companies up in Canada and they would talk about going to the US, it's not one market. Every single part of the US has different connotations, different challenges, different opportunities. But it's a very close relationship. The number, 2/3 of the US states, their biggest export market is Canada. And California, Canada is the second biggest export market. If you're in Canada and you go into the produce section, everything is either from California or from Mexico. So those ties are very, very strong, and they have been for a long time.
And Gavin, I imagine that a lot of those ties are culturally related, right? Not just trade related.
Absolutely, and there, how many how many Hollywood actors and comedians have you realized, oh my gosh, he or she's Canadian? What? Jim Carrey, Mike Myers, Ryan Gosling, Ryan Reynolds. There's a whole debate between which Ryan is better. No, I think that the relations are so intertwined. No two countries have a more entrenched, close, interdependent bilateral relationship than Canada and the U.S. It's really unique in the world. Agreements like NAFTA, which we'll get into later, but also loads of other security, military, cultural agreements, MOUs signed between the two countries at a federal level, but also states and provinces at a provincial level, municipalities, sister cities programs, the list goes on. And one of our challenges here in LA and Southern California, Arizona, Nevada, the territory that Patricia and I cover, is to tease out those relationships which are so ingrained. Often we don't know that company X or organization Y are doing partnerships and work in, say, Tucson. But those things exist all over the place. They don't necessarily need our help, and we don't have to, there's no rule that we have to know about it. But if people come to us and want to expand their network and want to understand the nuances of a territory. I also just wanted to say, if I may, there was a recent poll conducted through Foreign Policy magazine, the online magazine, online and print rather, and it was asking Americans and influencers about their views on Canada, and just some of the things that were teased out of that poll, the results of which have just been released, is Canada has such a positive impact on the U.S. These are perceptions being written. Climate change and environment is the most significant priority of the relationship. Strong partner on security and defense, a vital trading partner, reliable. These sorts of concepts and feelings. So we're just happy to be a good neighbor and to have such a strong and stable neighbor as the United States.
And I imagine much of that is driven, Patricia, by the fact that there's not just an exchange of products or ideas, but there's a lot of exchange of people that happens on a daily basis across our shared border. And many people who live in either location or work in either location.
And exactly. I mean, technology has changed in North America how people travel, how people work, how people interchange in terms of their business. And people are traveling a lot more, and businesses expect to be able to have their employees move back and forth. And that's one of the things that we work closely with businesses, in helping them when they're looking at talent, when they're looking at labor mobility, is assisting them to make sure that we keep that border thin, but we keep it secure. As our Consul General likes to say, we want to make sure we let the good people in and we keep the bad people out.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the concept of the thin border? I think that's an interesting point.
There's a few things. I don't know if you've had the chance to travel from Canada back into the U.S. lately.
Yeah.
So we have pre-clearance in 8 different cities, and we have 2 more that are going to join. So if I'm traveling from Toronto back to Los Angeles, I go through U.S. Customs in Toronto, and that is run by the U.S. Homeland Security, U.S. Customs. I go through, so it means that when I land in LAX, if I'm a business person, I walk out of that terminal. I'm just walking, I'm not going through the international terminal. I pick up my bag and I leave. So it allows people to flow that much easier into some of the major airports. And again, you're just making it easier for people and goods. And again, when it comes to trucks and cargo and trains, we work very closely on both sides of the borders, where we have customs officials from both sides looking at goods, ensuring that everything is correct, and then they flow through. It just means that things are traveling faster, but still securely.
And this is fairly unique among world nations, right, to have this type of relationship?
Absolutely. And if I could just add that it's not just the flow of goods or people, but ideas and concepts and services that we're allowed to throw, thanks to not just trade agreements, but thanks to the opportunities given and a currency market and a shared economy, but in North America, that allow these things to blossom. We're sitting here at Cal State Long Beach, CSU. Long Beach, and the exchanges between universities and academic institutions are essential for that, and continue to have Canadian studies programs at universities, U.S. students going to study in Canada, and vice versa. The U.S. is the #1 destination foreign destination for Canadian students, and those sorts of exchanges continue to bring us closer together and make for families on cross-border. Your sister-in-law may be Canadian, etc. And you go visit up north. I mean, we're just so connected.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the concept of a North American economy, right? I mean, does that mean that what happens in Washington or Ottawa, matters less than the priorities of the people who are moving across those borders?
We have the negotiations, as many people will know, start tomorrow for NAFTA, the initial negotiations. And I think that's one of the things that when everybody's talking about renegotiating NAFTA, let's make it better. It came into place in 1994. Many things didn't exist in 1994 that exist today. So what can we do to that agreement to continue to build on where we're at, so that people flow easily across the border? So goods, services, technology continue to grow. How can we work together to make what has been a very successful partnership and has grown the economy worldwide in North America? How can we make it better entering into the 21st century?
Yeah. I think if what I'm hearing you're saying is that there's really no nation can be entirely self-sufficient, that you sort of need to look at where those potential partnerships lie. We'll talk about NAFTA in depth in a minute, but wonder, Gavin, if you might talk about some of the other areas where the U.S. and Canada work together closely that may surprise people.
Well, there's a number of examples, but I mean, the partnerships at the official government level are very, very thorough. Cybersecurity, military cooperation, banking regulations, investment regulations, energy security, R&D programs and research, just to name a few. On the security side, I like the example of the so-called Shipwriter program. This was instituted in the Great Lakes region, where say a criminal was trying to smuggle goods across Lake Erie. Well, if that criminal crossed into the Canadian border and was being pursued by U.S. customs agents, they could not pursue into Canada. And then I had to frantically call and get their Canadian counterparts to pick up the chase. So disjointed, uncoordinated. Mm-hmm. And what has changed with the Shipwriter program is that we have dual national agents on the same ship. So that means that no matter where the potential criminal goes, they can pursue and arrest on either side of the border. This is just a very simple example, but one that changes the nature of the relationship and continues to entrench cooperation.
And fairly comforting.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, and following on that, just Gavin mentioned early on when he was talking about our office, we have a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And back in the spring, as you read in the news, the opioid epidemic is out. It's across the States, it's in Canada. But we've been successful in some parts in Canada in dealing with the issue. And what our representative did is he did a presentation. He brought down some of his colleagues from Canada and did a presentation in our office and invited his counterparts on a municipal, on a state, on a federal level to come in and learn about some of the successes that we've had, some of the ways that we've managed to find to address this issue and share it. And it was, we had a full
15 plus agencies there, yeah.
So, those are other type of, opportunities or other types of partnerships that we're seeing where we can share the information from what we've learned to help address, something that's as serious as that is.
Let's talk a little bit about trade. We've mentioned it. I think many people would be surprised to find out that Canada and not China or here in Southern California, Mexico, is in fact our largest trading partner. And Gavin, why do you think that's the case?
Well, we're not just the largest, but we're the largest by far. Combined export of goods to China, Japan, and the UK doesn't equal the amount that the US exports to Canada. It's very impressive and quite astonishing, the numbers. 73% of Canada's trade last year was with the United States. It is an interdependent relationship, not one more dependent on the other. That's how we view it, and the numbers play it out in terms of trade deficits. It's a very small trade deficit between Canada and the United States. But I think this goes back historically to Canada as a trading nation. This is a nation where natural resources are plentiful, where education is high as well now, and then over the decades, over the centuries, the importance of trade to Canada has been concretized in the nature of our economy, which is mainly based in small and medium enterprises. Patricia, maybe you wanted to jump off on that?
Exactly. I mean, when we talk about the Trade Commissioner Service, of which I'm a part of, there's 1,000 of us around the world in every embassy, consulate, high commission. But when you're in Canada and you're working with companies as they first start to export, one of the changes you see is they go globally now. But their first foray is usually down into the US. Again, there's that comfort level, same language, proximity. Most people have traveled there, but they're also, you know, they have relationships that they've built over the years, and so they often come down to the US and look for those first opportunities here.
And I imagine much of that has to be driven by the fact that such a large percentage of the Canadian population lives within very close range to the US border.
Within 100 miles.
90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the US border.
So the success of those small and medium enterprises you talked about really is connected to trade. That makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit more, Tricia, about the nature of trade between our nations? What are we trading?
We are trading, I think we are trading everything. And when you look at it, again, it depends on which market you're looking at. You know, the US and Canada in terms of energy, there's an energy security that is there when you look, whether it's oil and gas. Agriculture, although we import huge amounts of California nuts and avocados and fruit and vegetables. Wine, which, yes, large
Our
amounts.
favorite.
Yes, are large amounts of wine. I think, in fact, Canada is the largest consumer of California wine. That's out there. But again, it will depend on the market. So when I'm talking about Los Angeles companies that I'm looking at or that are coming to us, it can be anything from infrastructure to clean technology to life sciences. You have two very large clusters here in Orange County and down in La Jolla, and we have a large amount of Canadian companies that are doing business. They are doing research. You have tech transfers between universities. A large amount of innovation